Rugged little tin Lizzies are made to order for a people itching to get up and go.
In the early part of the 20th century, when cost systems were just developing, direct labor constituted a significant part of total product cost. Data relating to direct labor was readily available and convenient to use. Accountants believed there was a high correlation between direct labor and overhead costs. Today, direct labor remains a viable base for applying overhead cost in some companies. However, technological advances in the past 2 decades have made drastic changes in manufacturing. Automation has greatly decreased the amount of direct labor required in the manufacture of many products. So much so that some manufacturing companies, such as Hewlett-Packard, consider factory labor to be an indirect cost. Companies are also manufacturing a wider range of products.
Many organizations, manufacturing as well as service, can literally produce thousands of variations of products and offer their products worldwide to a myriad of different types of customers. And as a result, it's imperative for a company to better understand where am I making money and where am I not.
Most significantly, total overhead costs have increased to the point in some companies that there's no longer a strong correlation between overhead and direct labor.
Overhead cost is the fastest growing segment of cost, yet many organizations are still using the same methods that were developed in the 1940s and 50s to allocate that overhead. Well, in the 1950s and 60s, when dividing overhead costs by direct labor, you would come up with an overhead rate of approximately 300% to 400%, meaning there's $4 of overhead cost for every dollar of labor. Well, when you have that ratio, that's not too out of the ordinary, and you can't be that far off when allocating overhead because it's only about a 3 to or 4 to 1 ratio. Yet in the 1980s, for example, in the semiconductor industry, their overhead rate was 1,900%. My overhead rate, for example, at Motorola, making radios, was close to 1,500%, meaning my overhead cost was much higher, the numerator, much higher than the denominator. And that's an example of a measure of how out of sync the cost allocation methods had gotten.
To overcome cost distortions, managers have turned to other overhead assignment methods. Rather than use a plant-wide overhead rate, some companies use a conventional costing system that involves a 2-stage allocation process. In the first stage, overhead costs are assigned to cost pools, such as individual departments or operations. In the second stage, costs are applied from the cost pools to individual jobs.
If you're looking at an allocation basis, one of the perhaps best analogies that I could give you would be our information services area. It's really 2-stage. One is going from IT to the other departments that's incurring those services, be they fixed or variable. That is really combined with all the other elements of the accounting department, the payroll expense, the rent, all the different elements of costs that we incur, so then we allocate that to the store. So it's really kind of a 2-phase or 2-step allocation method.
While a conventional 2-stage system works well when a company is handling or producing limited product lines, it's less effective when a company has a range of products that differ in volume, lot size, and complexity of production.
And it's increasingly becoming important that you understand where the costs are in fact being consumed. All costs are not in fact consumed equally.
Where product diversity exists, activity-based costing assigns overhead costs more accurately. ABC uses many more cost pools than traditional approaches. Also, these cost pools may be defined differently. For example, rather than being defined as departments, the pools may represent activities, such as product design, materials purchasing, or factory maintenance.
For example, a very common cost pool would be the procurement cost pool or the order fulfillment cost pool. And that would be a collection of all the activities throughout the organization of a similar cost behavior pattern. Then you define a cost driver or an allocation method for that cost pool.
While overhead cost pools are usually associated with manufacturing operations, service companies with complex operations such as Proctor Financial Insurance Corporation also find using cost pools effective.
I actually refer to the departments as the cost pools that we've organized the company into. We have corporate support departments, which would be your traditional overhead departments of accounting, facilities, systems, sales, marketing. And we also have the product support departments, which are typical insurance company functions, claim processing, policy production, etc. Then we have some departments that are actual profit centers, which are product lines.
In ABC, overhead costs are assigned to products or services based on the number of times each cost pool driver is used. For example, the overhead costs of procuring material for a production run might be assigned based on the number of purchase orders used. As with most techniques, ABC should be used sensibly.
Most best practice ABC cost systems today that I've seen and read about and actually worked with have anywhere from 10 to 15 maximum cost pools and cost drivers. Quite simply meaning that the more cost pools, the more allocation methods you have does not make your cost system better. So we don't want to get carried away here just because we're moving away from one allocation method based on direct labor to now having the capability of multiple cost allocation methods.
Let's take a closer look at how ABC and conventional costing systems differ in the way they allocate overhead. For instance, the indirect costs of engineering a custom-designed product would not be part of the overhead allocated to a standard product. ABC allocates non-manufacturing as well as manufacturing costs. Conventional costing systems stick to manufacturing costs. Also, ABC may not allocate some manufacturing costs, such as plant rent, because there is no logical basis for doing so. Conventional costing systems allocate all manufacturing costs. With ABC, overhead rates may be based on the actual level of activity rather than on the budgeted level, resulting in idle capacity costs not being assigned. Conventional costing systems use the budgeted level, which allows for idle capacity. Because it focuses on the actual level of activity involved in producing a product or service, activity-based accounting offers corporate managers a more valid way to measure costs.